Welcome, everybody, to our VBC Happy Hour for this Monday, August 21st. My name is Todd DiPastino. I am the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and I'm often host of this program, VBC Happy Hour. I'm not tonight. Glenn Flickinger will be the host. I'll be his wingman. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
Excellent, Todd. Great.
I'm just letting in from the waiting room now Mr. Masters, Scott Masters, who is Canada's greatest history teacher. And I had the great privilege of meeting Mr. Masters in person. I did get his autograph. And here is a great picture of us, the two of us, Scott Masters, there on the left, me in the center, and then the great Ed Cottrell, who's also with us tonight on Zoom, 101-year-old P-47 pilot from World War II, flew 65 missions and has shared his story here with us on the Veterans Breakfast Club. It was a pleasure to meet Scott in person after 3 years of knowing him for 3 years here on the Zoom platform on our BBC Happy Hour. Also, Mary Klepper from Baltimore. I got to meet her for the first time. And that's because D-Day Conneaut took place in Conneaut, Ohio. It's the largest reenactment, World War II reenactment in the nation. And it featured, I think 18,000 people were there on Saturday. And it featured this reenactment of the D-Day landings. And it was great fun. We did 2 buses, 110 people up there. Many of the people here in this room went on that trip. Ron Stakovich, I see he was on it. We had a heck of a lot of fun, had dinner afterwards. But one of the great thrills for me truly was meeting Scott Masters and Mary Klepper. After years of knowing them remotely, getting to meet them in person. I'm going to be throwing the program to Glenn soon, but I do want to make a few announcements. First of all, I do want to welcome our special guest, Brigadier General Chris Petty. Hello, Chris Petty from Colorado. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Todd.
General Petty graduated from West Point, did 31 years in the United States Army, served in a number of combat command positions, and also then went on to found Battle Digest, which he'll tell you about, and authored the book 12 Battles Every American Should Know, Lessons Learned from Lexington to Desert Storm, and he's going to be talking about that tonight. I do want to thank our sponsor. It's been our sponsor for quite a while now, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They underwrite this program. They provide health, wellness, and nutrition services throughout Pennsylvania and much of West Virginia. And Tobacco Free is their program dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use, to educating people about tobacco hazards and secondhand smoke, and advocating for policies that build healthier places to live, work, and play. You can find out more at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. And you could also, if you know somebody who's looking to quit, would like to quit, you could use our quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. That's 1-800-QUIT-NOW, where they counsel people in how to quit smoking. So we want to thank Tobacco-Free Adagio Health for their long-standing support of our programming. I do want to let people know that we have a program next week, every Monday night. This is BBC Happy Hour. Every Monday night, we have it, 7 p.m. Eastern. And once a month, we try to squeeze in what we call open conversation. And this is where we take some of the loose ends that every program has and, follow up some topics that may have been brought up in the course of the month. One of the problems that we face with the Veterans Breakfast Club is there are too many stories and not enough time. So this program is 90 minutes. We could only get so much in. Our in-person breakfasts are only 90 minutes, so we could only get so many stories in. So what we like to do is build in this time open conversation. And so we'll be having open conversation a week from tonight. James McCormick, past president of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, himself a recipient of 3 Purple Hearts, and Operation Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom. He'll be joining us. Also, a first-timer, Bob Connor from the Philadelphia area, Vietnam veteran. Get this. He posted in 2016, he posted a remark online on a bulletin board somewhere that he remembers a mass grave in Vietnam at Ben Hoa Airport. Somebody from Vietnam contacted him and said, "Where is that mass grave? We would love to, to recover remains." And that started this humanitarian project that Bob has spearheaded, where he helps the Vietnamese find mass graves of NVA Viet Cong remains and return so that they can be identified and returned to the Vietnamese families. We're going to have Bob on to tell us a little bit about that project and about his work in Vietnam. And then finally, Jerry Augustine, he's a Vietnam veteran with the new memoir, Vietnam Beyond. He'll be joining us next week. And then we have, any other topics that you like to bring to the table. We'd love to entertain them. We began, the Veterans Breakfast Club did 15 years ago in 2008 with in-person events, and we still do in-person events, and we're having one this Wednesday. If you live in the Pittsburgh area, please do join us near Sewickley. Christchurch at Grove Farm has been very generous with opening their wonderful event space, and the wonderful volunteers at the church prepare a great breakfast for us. And we hold a veteran storytelling event there, and it's absolutely, you never know what you're going to hear. I'm working on the program right now. We have something special planned for it. We'll probably have a D-Day veteran, Utah Beach veteran Warren Goss there. Please join us if you can. That's on Wednesday, August 23rd. And I thought I'd also throw this in, projecting, I know, far out into the future, but I see Bob Von Bargen is with us here. Bob and Roy Plummer at the Armed Forces Heritage Museum in central New Jersey, in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, just on the east side of the Delaware River, just south of Trenton, east of Philadelphia. The Armed Forces Heritage Museum invited the Veterans Breakfast Club to come out and do a program, and we are doing that on Friday, October 20th. So if you live in the Philadelphia area, central New Jersey, we'd love to have you join us. We'll be filling you in on more details. It'll be at the Town and Country Diner at Bordentown, New Jersey, again on October 20th. And just to let you know that we love to do out of town events. And so if you're interested in having us out there, wherever you are, we'd love to come out and do a VBC event. Finally, we publish a quarterly magazine, BBC Magazine. This is our summer issue. We send it out for free to about 8,500 households. And then we print up another 7,500 for hand distribution. We send them for free wherever they can be distributed. If you would like 1 or 2 or 25 or 50 or a box of 100, let us know, and we will send them out to you, and you can distribute them as you wish. But I now want to turn things over to Glenn. Glenn, thank you so much for hosting this program.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight. And as always, it's a lot of fun to do these programs. For those of you who might not know me, most I'm sure do, Glenn Flickinger. I'm a board member of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And for the past 3 or so years now, I've had the great privilege of hosting this Greatest Generation Live, which is everything about World War II. So it's been an honor to do it. And I've learned a lot myself, met a lot of veterans, a lot of authors. And tonight, as Todd said, we have Brigadier General retired Chris Petty with us. So say hello again, Chris.
Hello, everyone. Honored to be with you. Seems like a great format, and your audience seems wonderful. So I'm looking forward to a conversation.
And as always, the fun I get to have is when we have these guests on, I get to talk to them for a couple or 3 hours before the program in order to prepare for the program. So I've had some really interesting discussions with Chris earlier today and then a week or so ago. So now I'm going to perform my normal technical challenge here, which I'll ask help from the boss to get this right. And that Chris, these are all beautiful photos that Chris has shared with us. And I'm going to try. I
think you're sharing your entire screen there, Glenn. So why don't you stop sharing?
Yeah.
And then.
Well, and I just lost my PowerPoint. So let me get back again.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. That happens. You've only done this about 100 times.
I know, but I only do it once a month, and my memory is a 3-week memory. Yeah. So. Okay, I got the PowerPoint back up, and now I know I go to share, and I just got to pick the right screen, right?
Yeah, pick the right screen, which will be the PowerPoint, just the PowerPoint. If you see.
How's that?
I think you're still sharing your whole screen.
Goodness.
I think you are. I mean, we can see that. We can see the PowerPoint.
Oh,
but
wait a second here.
There you go. Yeah, now we go. Now go to slideshow.
Yeah.
And then play from the start. That's perfect.
Okay, I knew I could manage, but give me 15 or 20 minutes. I was going to get there. Okay, so we've already covered the basics here. We're thrilled to have Brigadier General retired Chris Petty with us. He's a real gentleman, and his story is a really interesting one. We're actually going to spend, once we get through the introduction here, the first half hour or so talking about Chris's experience in the military, his 31 years in the military, and the really incredible experience he had in Iraq back in 2006 and 7, if I got those years right. But retired only now for what, 3 or 4 years, Chris?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm just hit over 5 now. I know, it's amazing.
5 years, though, he's been a pretty busy man, including the writing this book, 12 Battles Every American Should Know. Lessons learned from Lexington to Desert Storm. What made you write this book? What was your idea with this book, Chris?
Well, it stemmed from my retirement business, which was, as we'll talk about, putting together historically concise and yet detailed summaries of famous battles throughout history. And I started to amass a collection of these wonderful trifold brochures, which I'll show you a sample later. But I was one of these officers that actually taught professional development classes to my soldiers at different levels of command. I think I even started doing this as a platoon leader, like the Army wants you to do. And I put together these classes, and it took me a long time to do it, and a lot of preparation. So it was hard. I couldn't do it more than once a quarter, right. But they were good classes. And so I said, well, why doesn't the Army have something like this? We're supposed to study war. I mean, it's foundational to our profession. And so I really created the Battle Digest concept. And then that evolved into this book. And the passion of the book is, we are so terrible with history education now. And if you've been following the media over the last few months, you've even seen some reports that, everyone knows that, math and English are at all-time lows. Well, history and civics is lower than that. It's an embarrassment. And so the kids aren't reading this stuff. The teachers aren't teaching this stuff. I want to make it easy. And these are good, tight stories for a 10-year-old up to the 95-year-old World War II veteran and a historian. So I want to do my bit to contribute to our cultural heritage and our history.
Right. We're going to get deeper into that a little bit later. And this is also a website besides the book. And the website is what? battledigest.com.
Yeah, if you're sitting on a computer, check out battledigest.com. You'll see my retirement business. Much better presentation, and you'll see all the visuals on what I'm doing. So check that out. And that's actually how you subscribe and order things and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks.
Right. Okay. So what's interesting about Chris is the military experience that he had, and he referenced some of it in his thoughts right there, that led up to his retirement and then his desire to develop this material. So we're going to spend some time here getting to know Chris and his military experience. Chris, this is you at the very end of that 31 years, correct?
Yeah, it's only been 5 years. I look a lot older now. That's kind of sad, but yeah, that's my last official Army photo as a one-star general, and still looking all spit and polished and everything. So yeah.
handsome, but look, here's even more handsome.
Yeah, that's young.
The very beginning of the journey.
That's young, idealistic cadet Petty, West Point class of 87, thinking he's going to be the next Patton and MacArthur and Eisenhower. Yeah.
So class of 87, you started in what, 83?
Yep, that's right.
Where are you from, Chris? Where'd you grow up? What sort
Colorado. I was lucky to grow up in Colorado, where I ended up retiring. And because a lot of my career was in the National Guard, a really interesting journey here. My family didn't have to move a lot, which was a real advantage actually for my kids growing up. So yeah, Colorado, and now I'm settled in Colorado, and I plan to stay here.
Did you come from a military family?
My dad was a West Point graduate, class of 62. he was the first one that I know of in the family line. I was second generation, and my son, one of my four sons, is a West Point class of 14. He's still serving as a captain. He's just about to make major. He branched infantry and then got in touch with his inner geek and branch transferred to cyber. So he's a cyber officer in the Army right now.
Ah, wow. Cyber warfare.
Yeah, one of my kids, I have four boys, and I won't go into too much detail, but one of my boys went to the Coast Guard Academy, and he just gave up command of a cutter in the Gulf. So they're still out doing good stuff.
That's a military family for sure. We've got a lot of them as members and a lot of great examples, but that's a great one. Could I ask, is your father still with us?
Yeah, he is. He's 83 and healthy, and boy, he travels a lot, and I'm just really hoping I have his genes, because my mom and dad are both 83 and healthy and really moving around well and sharp as tack. So I'm hoping.
Class of 62, he must be a Vietnam vet.
He's what?
Class of 62, I'm guessing he spent some time in Vietnam.
He didn't. Interesting story, real quick. He went to Germany to teach nuclear demolitions, which I know, the old guys understand, but the young guys scratch their head like, these guys are teaching how to blow up bridges, on against the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons, really? So he was at a NATO school teaching that for most of his time. So I guess in a way he got lucky, but he sure loved his tour there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's something I've never heard of, blowing up a bridge with a nuclear weapon. It seems like they're killing flies with elephants, but
part of the doctrine back then. So yeah, it was a different time, of course.
Well, Todd's done a lot on the Cold War. It'd be fascinating to talk to your father, don't you think, Todd?
Absolutely. That's a subject right up our alley. Yeah. No, I've not heard of that either.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So that's how he served his time. And then he got out. He did his commitment and got out, and and he did well. He was a good civilian entrepreneur and all that stuff. So all was well.
Excellent. Well, let's launch into your career. You graduated from West Point, and you told me something earlier today that surprised me. You graduated with your paratrooper wings from West Point.
I did. So, one of the nice things about the military academies, and I can only speak for West Point directly, but they have programs in the summer where, the cadets are required to do, I think this was after plebe year, freshman year, you had to go to an Army school. Airborne school was a top choice because you get to jump out of airplanes and you're a young guy. It's pretty cool, pretty exciting. And you get to wear some cool stuff on your uniform, like, you know how soldiers are. So, every summer you have to do military training. Airborne school was an option. I think the longest summer vacation I had at West Point was probably 2 weeks long. That's the college experience right there, but that's the way it should be. So I went to airborne school. Yeah.
So when you graduate, were you thinking of going into the paratroopers, but instead went into aviation, or how did that work?
Okay, so interesting story. West Point had not, this is between my junior and senior year now. Most of the seniors do cadre duty in the summer to train the new cadets and all that, Beast Barracks, which is our version of basic training and all. And West Point had not sent anybody to Ranger School for like 10 years because cadets failed the course and it was embarrassing. So West Point shut it down. But they decided to open it up again the year I was eligible as a rising senior, I guess would be the right terminology now. And so we had to compete for a slot to go to U.S. Army Ranger School between our junior and senior year. I think we started with 120 cadets and there was only 10 slots. So believe me when I tell you the competition for Ranger School was as tough as Ranger School. They weren't going to fail. So I got to do that as a junior. So here I am coming back to West Point as a senior. I got my airborne wings. I got my Ranger tab. I'm feeling pretty good. But I will say this. They probably made a mistake sending me to Ranger School because I'm in Ranger School. And I know you guys know the basic contours of that school. It's really a tough one. I'm proud of that one. And so I'm patrolling at night, as is common in the school. That's all you're doing, patrolling, setting up ambushes and raids and recon missions. simulating behind enemy lines at night, blah, blah, blah. So, you're tired, you're hungry, you're worn out, you're at the edge of your limits. And every time we'd be finished with a patrol or something, we'd have to move on to another mission. These helicopters would come in and pick us up, middle of nowhere, middle of night, whatever. And I get inside the back of this helicopter and I'm thinking to myself, my God, we just spent 3 nights moving through the forest this far. This helicopter just moved us another 20 kilometers in 5 minutes. And these guys smell like soap and they look well fed. So no kidding. As I'm finishing Ranger School, I'm thinking, maybe I'll branch aviation, which I did. And that's really why I did.
Interesting. Grass is always greener on the other side of the hill, right?
Yeah, I know. It was a fateful choice and it was a good choice. Yeah.
It occurs to me, I forgot one step here that we wanted to take, Todd, and that's to ask the audience, look at this list of battles that are included in Chris's Battle Digest book. When we get to the end of Chris's experience and we go more into Battle Digest, we'd like to get your opinion from the audience as to what you think the 3 most important battles are in American history. Okay. And you can put it in the chat room. Todd can look at it. We'll get you to raise your hand and speak to it. Which 3, because obviously we went to 12 battles, we'd be here all night. So 3 battles, and why do you think that's important? And Chris, there was another point you and I talked about this as to the sort of the thinking about how you chose these 12.
Yeah, it's obviously this is subjective, and that's part of the fun of the conversation I hope we have. But for me, this was more than the greatest battles of American military history. This was a combination of, number one, I wanted to limit the amount. So 12 seemed good. 10 was too small, 20 is too much. You got to find the sweet spot for a reader. So 12 was a good number. So given 12, I'm thinking if I'm an American, like even passing an exam to become a citizen or something, some hypothetical, what 12 battles should I really know if I call myself an American? Some of these battles are clearly the beginning of a great conflict, Lexington, Concord, obviously Pearl Harbor, things like that. But some of these battles will surprise you because they're in here because it's part of our cultural history. For instance, you could say, why does someone have to know Little Bighorn? It was sort of inconsequential. Well, I disagree. I mean, Little Bighorn is a big part of the American story. It's part of our cultural heritage. So there is some of that in here. If you're an American, you should know about Custer's Last Stand. It's part of our common heritage. So that's why it may strike some as a little odd.
Okay. Yeah. And I love this because it results in endless debate.
Yes, of course it does. Yeah.
I mean, this is at least a couple of 6-packs, if not a couple of bottles of wine as well. So back to the audience. So go ahead, post in the chat what you think and it doesn't have to be any of these 12, by the way. If you think there's ones Chris missed, if you would like to, come up with your own 3 or add 1 or 2, that would be fine as well. And we'll get to that towards the end of our discussion with Chris. Sorry, I forgot that piece. So what sort of helicopter are you sitting in here, Chris?
So a lot of your audience will recognize a UH-1. That is the old Harley Davidson of Army helicopters, in my opinion. And I loved it. And half of my career was spent in Hueys. I got over 1,500 hours in Hueys and doing lots of great things in that machine. But I will tell you, as a guy who's flown Hueys and Blackhawks, I will take a Blackhawk any day over a Huey if I'm going to fly into a combat situation, because it's an amazing airframe. It does take a licking and keep on ticking, and it'll get you home. So plus it's a lot more powerful. You can carry more. So anyway, this is just a typical day as a young guy. I'm a captain in this picture. I'm probably a company commander. I won't bore your audience with the career ladder of a commissioned officer because they're probably very familiar with it. But I had some good assignments. I got to do 2 back-to-back company commands of UH-1 units before I found my way onto a battalion staff. And then really a highlight of my career, and one that I knew I would only get one opportunity for, is I was a battalion commander and got to take a unit over to Iraq during the surge. And so I knew this was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And as your audience knows, this is 2006 when I went over there, and it's a pivotal time in the war. I mean, the war had just shifted dramatically towards the end of 2006 into the sectarian fight that started to blow up in Iraq. And so we knew it was going to be a difficult time. In fact, I told Glenn earlier, I think when I got there with this battalion, and a battalion, by the way, just to set the framework here, this is about 700 soldiers, and roughly, and the numbers change because units actually come and go, but 700 soldiers and approximately 46 helicopters that are flying around Iraq every single night in some of the most complex sky ballets you could ever script with operations. And so it was a really difficult, really challenging, yet very meaningful and rewarding experience. And so I kept a journal, which I'm glad I did, because I'll write a book on it someday, because I just think it's a fascinating story of bringing a whole bunch of Americans together from all kinds of different states and experiences and putting together this battalion to do some good stuff. This was quite an experience. And by the way, this battalion had, it was called a General Support Aviation Battalion. And again, I won't get into the weeds, but the neat thing about this is it had 2 full medevac companies. And that's 15 medevac companies each. So, or 15 aircraft each, Blackhawks, medevac configured. And in this day and age in a war, you can't even fight on a battlefield without an active medevac capability. So everybody needs one of these GSABs in theater. So this is a high demand item. But in addition to the medevac, you have a company of Blackhawks, which you could do, limitless kind of things with, flexibility and stuff. And then here's the icing on top for a theater commander or a division commander, is you have a full company of Chinooks. That's 15 Chinooks that I had in Iraq. And believe me, these things are high demand items when you're trying to move troops around, and especially when you're trying to assault an objective with massed combat power in the dead of night to surprise a high value target, basically surround his house and block the roads out and all that stuff. And so, a Chinook typically holds 33 guys, like in seats and seatbelts. Every single night, we're stuffing 54 paratroopers in the back of these Chinooks for our night missions. You have a picture.
Around, but
you have a picture of that. I mean, this is a typical night of loading the back of helicopters on a pickup zone somewhere on another FOB to take these guys onto an objective, which has been well thought out with intel. And here are the high value targets that we're tracking. This is the network, the Al-Qaeda network in this little village. We want your helicopters here, here, and here, which is what I'm doing at the table there in the other picture. Is I'm planning missions. This is a Blackhawk. So stuffing guys in the back of a Blackhawk. There's no seats in this helicopter. They're just strapped in, and as soon as you hit the objective, they're out. So it was high intensity, high op tempo for a full year, where we did these complex air assaults every third night for a year. And each of these is putting between 250 and 500 paratroopers on the objective. So at the end of a year, this battalion has infilled a full division's worth of combat troops on objectives out there in Iraq, around the countryside. In the middle of Mosul.
These were 82nd Airborne paratroopers.
Yeah, so interesting story. So my primary customer for a year was this gentleman in this picture, Ross Davidson. He was my peer. I was his supporting aviation commander. he's the battalion commander that I'm working with on all these air assaults. So Ross Davidson is a commander of a battalion in the 82nd that was OPCON, or operationally controlled, basically by the Theater Special Task Force. Now, that, you know, General McChrystal's unit, as I can use these safe terms from his book, this is the task force. This is not a division like the 25th Infantry Division that owns a piece of Iraq. This is General McChrystal's task force. So they're centralized in Balad, and they can basically hit any objectives throughout the entire theater using Ross Davidson's paratroopers in the back of Petty's helicopters to go conduct the missions. So that's what we did for a year. This is my buddy. I took this picture because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You got this crazy aviation battalion commander, that's me on the right, who decides to go on a mission, a ground mission. I'm going to infill with these guys at night, go on a dismounted patrol to walk a mile in my customer's shoes. And it was eye-opening, exhausting. I didn't get into a firefight, thank God. They put me on point at one point in their patrol because they saw my Ranger tab, or they knew I was a Ranger. We didn't wear that stuff out there. And so like, hey, Petty, you take point for this leg of the patrol. And I'm thinking, we're walking along the Euphrates River up towards Fallujah. I hear a giant firefight erupt on the side of the river that we're moving towards. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can just read the headline. Aviation battalion commander killed walking on an infantry patrol with the 82nd Airborne Division by the Euphrates River. I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? It was crazy. The only reason I did it is because my boss was on R&R leave, and I didn't have to ask for permission because he never would have allowed me to do this. But once in a lifetime opportunity, I got to see how my customer moves on the ground, and it meant a lot to the infantry guys. I'll tell you that. When the aviation commander is down on the ground doing their thing, it meant a lot. So it was worth it.
Yeah. And you gave, and forgive me for jumping around a lot, but this is one of a couple of night scope pictures you took.
Yeah, this is
explain this.
I like this picture a lot because it just brings back the entire year for me. I mean, you can see the helicopters through this night vision goggle lens, and you could see 1, 2, 3, 4. You could see 5 helicopters in this formation. The 6th helicopter is taking the picture. I didn't know the picture was taken at the time, just some soldier gave it to me. And there's probably 2 or 3 helicopters in front of that. So, you know, this is 9 helicopters, 500 feet off the deck in Iraq, doing an air assault mission. And it was just every third night, almost like clockwork. And it's just the reason I took the daytime photo that you'll see is I very rarely was flying during the day. It was all nighttime. Iraq was all green to me. It's really strange, actually. But
so let me ask what is probably a really dumb question, but you know, World War II, there weren't any night operations. They didn't have these night vision goggles and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So why at night? I think
isn't it weird? Isn't it weird how the paradigm? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Glenn. What?
No, I'm just repeating myself. Why always at night?
Yeah, isn't it strange how the paradigm of war has changed so much? Because you think everyone knows, 100 years ago, we stopped fighting at night because we were just going to kill ourselves. Friendly fire, like Stonewall Jackson, right? We were going to kill ourselves. So, but now with the night vision technology and the advances of the advantage that U.S. forces have in night vision technology and training at night, you can gain such an advantage in maneuver and surprise by operating at night. You really put your enemy at a disadvantage. I mean, it's kind of obvious. And now that we have the technology to do it well, and we train for it all the time, that we really, really prefer the advantage of fighting at night.
So what other of our enemies have night vision technology? I assume the Russians do.
Yeah, you could almost say, Cliff or Glenn, you could almost say that everybody has night vision technology now. And even in Iraq, we knew some of the bad guys had night vision technology, but it's not widespread. It's not well trained. It's certainly not used in multi-echelon combined arms operations. So you might have one spotter, but if he starts shooting up at a helicopter, he's just one guy shooting at the blackness of night, because these helicopters are absolutely not illuminated. You can't see them. These lights you see in this photo, they're infrared lights. So these helicopters are completely black. So yeah, we had people shoot up at us, but we knew they weren't really aiming that well most of the time.
So one thing about the challenge of training those 82nd Airborne troopers and any of the soldiers for strictly night fighting, did that introduce significant more issues with them in terms of their reaction to, I mean, to me, it just sounds, battle is scary no matter what, but it seems to be magnified at night versus during the day.
It is.
Not all about training, all about making comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's a lot of training. To be good at it takes a lot of training, like anything complicated, and it's still difficult. I don't want to fool anyone. Night operations are still challenging. Your field of vision is limited. You don't have the peripheral vision on things. You just don't. You're looking through toilet paper tubes, no matter how you put it. So it is definitely challenging, but the advantage is worth it.
There's another shot at night. Let me find it. There it is. Beautiful picture. I mean, it belongs in a photo album, on the war or something.
I like this picture. I took this picture myself because it's just me coming back to the helicopter after some crew briefing. And again, for me, it was just like, I got to capture a couple of these typical night in Iraq things because they're only going to happen to me once. And it's just, we're on the ramp in Balad. I just was inside the headquarters talking to, at the time it was, I'm trying to think who just changed out command in Afghanistan before the painful withdrawal. That 4-star in Afghanistan, his name escapes me, it'll come to me. He was actually the colonel commander inside the task force building that I was probably coming right out to my helicopter for last adjustments. So anyway, that's this picture for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And these missions, to go back to the very first picture here, you're planning these missions. Did you go out on the missions as well all the time, or some?
Yeah, I did. I mean, not all the time, but I had one of those really, as a commander of a battalion, I actually had a mission that was a battalion level mission. So it was totally appropriate for the commander to be flying and leading those missions, because I was mixing Blackhawks with Chinooks, and I was coordinating with the Air Force AC-130 gunship and the fighters up above in the stack and the ground units. And this is a complex operation every night. So I, as a commander, yes, a pilot, but a commander, I should be the air mission commander doctrinally, actually, for this kind of mission. A lot of people, it was hard because I sort of butted heads with my boss about this in Iraq. He didn't see it that way. He wanted me back in the forward operating base, much more worried about, drip pans placed correctly under Humvees. And I wasn't having it. I mean, he didn't fire me. So It was working. But yeah, when I had a company level mission where one of my captains could legitimately do a company op, I did not command that, nor did I fly that. Yeah.
And as the air mission commander on these battalion size operations, you're out there in the air with your other, whatever it is, 30 or 40 helicopters, right? And as you say, the fighter planes stacked up above and support and all that.
Yep.
Describe the communications process. Were you in, World War II, it used to be, in the Navy and in the, sometimes in the Air Force, you had to have radio silence, right?
Yeah.
So the enemy couldn't find you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what were the protocols?
Yeah, it's, we still operate like that, Glenn, though. It's almost like a radio silence because everything we do is on timelines, time hacks, and code words. So for somebody that doesn't understand what we're doing, and oh, by the way, as a backdrop to all this, today's communications are totally scrambled. They're all frequency hopping radios. You're not going to just monitor a channel like you could in Vietnam. It doesn't happen anymore. These are all frequency hopping radios with algorithms that match, and all our, you have a special guy in the battalion that his job is to synchronize all this sensitive equipment so that it's talking to each other correctly on the right frequency and all that stuff. So you got that going, but it's still a tight time and code word operation. So I might, as I'm flying in with a formation this size, I would check in with, I've already got the ground guys in the back of the helicopter. So I'm talking to the battalion commander and his, so he knows what we're doing. I'm giving him his 10 minutes out kind of stuff, get your guys ready. But as I'm checking in with like an AC-130, it's basically a code word or, give me a sit rep, and he'll tell me if he sees movement, enemy activity on the LZs, the landing zones where we're going. So it's a tight ballet. It's a really tightly scripted ballet. Yeah. Kind of impressive actually, but you do enough of these and it's kind of just a day at the office in a sense. I mean, I never want to say it's a day at the office.
Hard for certainly us civilians to think of it that way.
Yeah. And this is just, I captured this photo, which I'm sure I shouldn't have because it's these things at the time were classified images and all this stuff. But, we had the nation's assets backing us up because of the task force. So we had satellites. I need photos of these LZs, these landing zones. I need this imagery. And man, we had it because we had the national level assets. It was pretty handy.
And this was your team?
This was my key team. So my sergeant major is on my left, got my arm around him. My XO is to the left of him, and my S3 is to my right. These guys, anyone knows an Army formation knows this is a key team right here to make the whole thing work. So we had to capture a picture of our little village on Balad in the middle of Iraq, there north of Baghdad. And we all look really happy. Yeah, we were getting it done.
Might have been a couple of beers involved in those smiles.
No beer in theater. That hasn't happened for a while now. It's a brave new world. We might have a non-alcoholic beer and a cigar, but there is no beer.
Interesting.
I had to do a little Article 15 action on some soldiers for sneaking stuff in. You can't do it.
So this was a 12-month assignment.
Yep, a full 12 months of fun. Yeah.
As you said, right in the middle of the surge and the very heavy fighting that took place.
Yep.
So from the beginning to the end, how did things change? By the time you're ready to come back, had things become much more positive?
Yeah, things were better when we left for sure. It had settled down. They had really dismantled a lot of the AQI, the Al-Qaeda foreign fighter networks by this time. A lot of good work on the ground. So things were calming down. It looked like victory might be imminent. I don't think I said it, but when I first got there, this is what I was telling Glenn. I lost this thread earlier, but in the first 3 months of me being there, 6 helicopters were shot down. I mean, these were really tough times. And trust me when I say our wives were very, very concerned. Because, 6 helicopters getting shot down in 3 months. I mean, what war does that happen in anymore? It may not sound like a lot to the Vietnam guys. They lost 100 helicopters in a month, or a couple of weeks. But to this modern era of warfighting, that's a lot. So anyway, it was an interesting time. But yeah, I think the surge was basically all in place. All the surge forces were in place by summer of 2007, and we left early fall. So yeah, things were settling down a bit.
And this is at the end of your tour there.
This is I guess this captures sort of the end. I'm saluting my sergeant major for something. I don't know if it was some official handover, but I thought it was kind of a cool picture there on the apron there at Balad. And so, yeah, that's kind of the end of this story.
Interesting.
The miraculous thing is, I tell you, Glenn, the thing I'm most happy about, most proud of is through all that difficulty, and I don't take personal credit for this. We did some good things, but we brought everybody home. And the battalions around me can't say that. The battalions we sent after me can't say that. We brought everybody home. And it was a real amazing team effort. And any of the aviators out there know, I mean, the close calls are, I was more worried about close calls in night skies with blackout ops flying across Baghdad, and helicopters that aren't even on the net, all of a sudden are 2 feet away from you, dashing through your formation. I mean, it was just amazing that we could bring everybody home.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
In spite of the fact that we had 2 helicopters shot down, by the way. One was a completely destroyed, tail rotor separated by heavy machine gun fire, flying 80 feet off the deck, 130 knots. And they had to auto rotate within, if they wouldn't have made the right decisions within a second, that everybody would have died in that helicopter. So that was the one DFC, Distinguished Flying Cross, I got to pin on one of my guys for saving everyone that day. So so there was some reasons that we shouldn't have brought everybody home, but we did.
Yeah. So let's pause here for a bit, because we're at the end of your story of the deployment in Iraq.
Yeah.
Todd, are there any questions about the Iraqi experience of Chris in the chat room? Or Todd, you know so much more about this than I do.
Well, in the chat room's on fire. Lots of people weighing in on the most important battles, a lot of back and forth about some of those battles and the weapons used in some of those battles. So I think everybody's had an ear to Chris's Iraq experience, and then also thinking about the discussion to come.
Okay. Okay. Well, then let's take just another minute here, Chris, on your next assignment.
Yeah.
Where are you here? What's this?
Okay, so here I'm in Bosnia. So after Iraq, an experience like this unit has really distinguished itself. It does present opportunities for a commander, I got to be honest. So I'm commanding a brigade next, and I won't bore you with all that. And lo and behold, I'm about to retire. I'm separating from the Army. No kidding. I'm going through the out-processing program at Fort Carson, Colorado, thinking I'm done. And I get a call from a 4-star, and he says, "Hey, Chris, how would you like to pin on a star and go to Bosnia and take over the NATO headquarters?" And of course, as any good officer would say, "Yes, sir. When do I leave? Sounds exciting." So that was another one of those career-changing things. So I got to pin on a star, and 3 weeks later, I'm in Bosnia without my family or anything. And I am the NATO headquarters commander there in this really interesting land in the Balkans. Here I am shaking the hand of the Bosnian president. He's coming out to talk some NATO business at one of the training sites, and just a little flavor of the tour. But fascinating experience. We don't learn a lot about Southeast Europe in our history programs, so I had to read a lot of books on the history of the Balkans and how we got to where we are and how dysfunctional that area can be over time in history. What I learned is these are 500-year-old problems, and they're the same as they were 500 years ago in many respects. And it's still a bit of a Cold War. It's a frozen conflict, in my humble opinion. And there's some real dysfunction in these in Bosnia, especially. Great people, great country. I really loved it. I'll have some friends there that I would love to go back and see that are local Bosnians that were on the staff and stuff. But this is a country that's struggling to shed its 500-year-old past, where East meets West and Orthodox Christianity meets Russian Orthodox Christianity meets European Christianity meets Islam, all right there. I mean, it's just amazing.
They're still unhappy about their uncle Joseph from 700 years ago who got assassinated.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
the funny thing is the contours of that conflict are all still there.
Yeah.
And it's a little sad to see, but we did our best. The NATO mission now is less about peacekeeping because U4, the guy next to me here, is the U4 commander, European forces. They sort of took over the QRF, quick reaction force, kind of, if there's a riot, we're going to try to go out and quell it. They took over that mission. NATO has the defense reform mission now. How do you build an NCO corps? How do you have an acquisitions program in your military that isn't corrupt? How do you do logistics management properly? How do you do collective training properly? It's all that kind of consultant work, which is important if you want to become a member of NATO.
Yeah. How long were you there, Chris?
I was there for a year, almost to the day. Yep. 14 and 15.
And then I know you wanted to show this picture. This is what, Chris?
Yeah, this is my last flight in an Army helicopter. It's actually a LUH-72, which is a newer helicopter that the Army brought in because it's just cheaper to operate. The Army figured, we're flying Blackhawks around in peacetime with 1.5 passengers in the back, at $6,000 a flight hour. Why don't we get a cheaper helicopter to do that at $400 a flight hour? So, it makes some sense. So anyway, I'm flying in an LUH. My last flight in the U.S. Army and somewhere in early 2018, a bittersweet day, but mostly a sweet day. And before that, though, I will say, just in case it stimulates conversation or questions, I did spend time. I came back from Bosnia and went to the Pentagon, where I worked on the Army staff for a while for General Anderson, who was the G3 operations and training. And so I got to see how the Pentagon works, how the Army works, budgeting, decision making, arms sales, stuff like that. It was fascinating, by the way. And then I went to Northcom and finished out my tour on the ops side of Northcom, doing ballistic missile defense and all that fun stuff. So if there's any questions on that, I'm interested. So there you have it. There's my military career.
What a great career.
It was interesting. It was rewarding.
Fascinating career. Thank you for your service, Chris, and some pretty trying times.
I appreciate it.
So you come back, and now we're going to talk about Battle Digest, and we're going to get into this discussion about which battles were the most important.
Yeah. So Battle Digest, as I said, I won't repeat it, but there was a need. I saw a tremendous need in the military, and I thought I was going to target the military as a slam dunk market, right? I mean, come on. I even put discussion questions on the back of these things. I mean, look at this. How could you get any easier than that? Read this for 30 minutes, outlines everything that happens, strategic context, everything. And then I even give you discussion questions. This is like a young Army captain's dream come true. But marketing is a challenge, as anybody who's done marketing knows. You can have the greatest product in the world, but getting it out to your audience is a real challenge. So it's fun. It's a passion. My approach is different, though. I hate to disappoint your audience, but I'm not a historian. I'm really not. I don't have the memory of a historian. I don't enjoy going down all of the extensive rabbit holes that historians love to do, and they're very good at it. I'm a military thinker. I'm a strategist. I want to know what I want. The so what I want. It's kind of like if my 4-star boss comes to me and says, "Hey, Petty, I want a summary of Gettysburg on my desk tomorrow. I want all the critical events, strategic context, key decision-making, outcomes, and lessons learned." And that's what I do. That's what I do. It's a different approach.
Yeah. I see you have, these are the individual, what do you call them? Digest.
They're the individual Battle Digest issues. You could call them trifold brochures. I call them that. Yeah, they're just to show your audience. I mean, they're made to be flip out things, with the maps and everything. So they're really nice, hardstock, glossy. You could take them on a battlefield tour. The idea was these would get passed around a little bit,
Actually, you have here one of my favorite battles, European battles from the Middle Ages, Agincourt.
Yep. Fantastic battle. I know you don't want to get into details, but fantastic battle. Fantastic and interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, also, what was, I think it was 1415. So even Todd can't remember that far back. Not even Julie Parsons could remember.
No one in your audience was there. They can't challenge us.
And here's one of the battle digests open. Obviously, this is what maybe
this looks like Shiloh to me. This
Shiloh,
looks like
yeah.
Wait, is it Shiloh?
Yeah,
This looks like Shiloh.
yeah.
That's Shiloh. Yeah. So I like this picture, and I sent it to Glenn for a reason. This book is beautiful. It's got the maps. It's got the images. It's the whole idea is you can't really understand a battle unless you can see a map. And so I'm really big on that, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so let's let the real battle begin.
Aha.
In terms of, let me go back to the very first slide, or one of the first slides. What do we think? What does our audience think were the most important, let's say, 3 battles or in American history? We'll limit it to American history out of the interest of ending this by midnight.
Man, I tell you, General, if you want to get criticism, just name the 12 of best of anything, and you're gonna get an argument. But let me see, just in case people can't read what was just on the screen, if you wouldn't mind putting that back up there.
Okay.
I just was going to say aloud the battles, the 12 battles, and everybody's going to immediately see battles that aren't on the list and that they think should be on the list. So the battles that are listed, the 12 most important battles that every American should know: the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill, Yorktown, the Alamo, Little Bighorn, Shiloh, love that choice, Antietam, love that choice, Gettysburg, Pearl Harbor, Midway, D-Day, and Desert Storm. Interesting selection.
Storm, yes.
Yeah, and Mary, thank you so much. He's not saying best of, or favorite. He's saying most important. And I'm sorry I don't want to step on you here, Glenn, but what's the criteria for what you consider important? Because there are different things. Battles can be important in different ways. As
I tried to tease it out in the beginning, that will be the crux of this discussion. Really, this is my opinion, but my opinion is based on not just the classic turning point battle of history, which there are a couple in there, but it's also this idea of American cultural heritage, like the Alamo. Yeah. I mean, you could say, well, of course, if you're a Texan, you think that's probably the most important battle in history, but to our American cultural identity, remember the Alamo. It's part of our story. That's why it's in there.
Amen. And it's funny because if I were to name 50 battles, and again, Glenn, I'm sorry for stepping on you here.
No, please, go ahead.
I just think it's so interesting because it's a way to think about history that we're not always used to. So if I were to list 50 most important battles in U.S. history, I probably wouldn't include Little Bighorn, but clearly it has to be in there because it's important to our culture and our identity and who we are as a nation. This is a very nuanced kind of list that you have.
It is. That's true. Yeah.
So, Todd, how would you like to go about getting anybody from our audience to comment on their thoughts on the most important battles?
Well, my favorite comment so far is Greg Yost just now. Wow, this is hard. Yeah. I think finally Greg Yost has encountered an intellectual challenge that is actually a challenge for him. Greg, let's see if you understand because he was pushing hard. Greg was here in the chat that the Battle of Leyte Gulf should be among the most important. But Greg, do you understand the ground rules aren't quite?
Yes, I do. Yes, absolutely. Now, because I sort of missed the very first part of the talk, so I sort of missed his understanding. And with that in mind, I will then sort of count this as my contribution, and I'll respectfully pass for the rest of the audience so that they can have their fun with this one.
Okay. Hey, and yeah, Brad Washabaugh put in the comment here. What's missing is any war on terrorism engagements. Beirut, 1983, for example.
Yeah.
Now, it just is a coincidence that Colonel Washabaugh happened to be in Beirut in 1983. And it reminds me of that great Bill Malden cartoon. Don't tell me this isn't the most important foxhole in the world. I'm in it. It's like the most important battle is going to be where you were. So there's that bias also always built in.
Yeah, let me comment on the war on terror, because obviously that's close to my heart. But I also have to, when I research these battles, I mean, it's a 2-month process just to research these things in detail. And what I find on as a lot of historians will back me up on this, and again, I'm not one, is it takes about 20 years or so to fully condense the lessons of the battle. It's amazing how we think we know everything about the Battle of Fallujah right now, but in another 10 years, it's going to actually look different when everything comes together. So that is a perspective I have.
Well, there's a rule of thumb there that I've read about for many years. The best battle histories about that battle are written 100 years later.
There you go.
And you ask why? Why would that be? Well, first of all the participants are gone, because, those participants, they have their view of it. And just like, if it was my foxhole, it was the most important foxhole. Well, that battle was my most important battle, or my part of the battle. And particularly the general officer participants, you take the World War II memoirs, almost all of them written in a very biased or self-serving sort of way. So, Todd, unless there's someone else that wants to jump on, I'd like to make 2 or 3 comments about the list.
Well, let's have Ms. Mary Klepper go first. Hello, Mary. Mary is somebody else who I met for the first time in person on Saturday at D-Day Conneaut. I saw this woman there and I thought, is that Mary Klepper? And it was so great to be able to meet you in person, Mary.
I know. It was so exciting meeting everybody. What a great day that was. So I was just going to jump in. So 2 of the battles that I think every American should know would be the Battle of Baltimore in 1812. Washington burned, Baltimore did not, and we got a national anthem out of it. So that's one thing. The other one, I think, you'd have to wait a while. So in 100 years, I'll be looking forward to your writing on this, Colonel, will be Operation Red Wings. I know we've got Lone Survivor out there, but I think Operation Red Wings would be very interesting. And then I'm just looking at your looking at your website now. I want to know more about this, so I hope you'll talk more about it, but I wanted to know about the age groupings, because I'm a tour guide. I take people to these sites.
Oh, okay.
So this would be,
Yes.
maybe you and I connect offline, because I will get you sales on these with my tour guide friends.
Absolutely.
Mary, absolutely. I mean, it's a great audience for this, and really easy. And
because we have to break things down. You never know who your audience is. It could be somebody who's never even heard of it, and somebody who's, who was there, the kind of thing. And you just don't know who you're talking to. So, and I'll put in for Vimy Ridge for a new battlefield book guide.
Okay.
That's
Mary.
Battle. You do connect.
Red Wing, Battle of Baltimore, Vimy Ridge. You're off the chart. Hand down. Put your hand down here. All right, Glenn.
Oh, okay. Unless there's someone else in the audience who wants to speak up, I'll hold off for anybody else.
Oh, and please do. Yeah, I do invite the audience to raise their hand or wave their hand in front of the camera if they want to make a pitch for Brad Washabaugh. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting
Marine. He doesn't. Marines don't. They don't.
They read. They read. They do.
They do. They like land.
They do. They that's a Colonel Washabaugh.
Todd, I go back to Beirut because I think 9/11 is really etched in Americans' mind, because that is the scene, that's the picture that we see. But in Beirut, 1983, we learned a lesson of asymmetrical warfare, where that was really the timeline where it started, where terrorists were very successful strategically in countering U.S. policy And it is a forgotten event in history. And, you know, as we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the Beirut bombing, I think it's time to look back and see just how that engagement really shaped where we are today. And so there's a lot to be learned from it. And there's a lot to be remembered too, with the sacrifice of, you know, 241 servicemen, the greatest loss of life for the Marines since Iwo Jima. And it was the largest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded. And tragic loss, but there's a lot of lessons from it that we should learn and remember today, especially in the war against terror.
And Brad, we should let people know that we're doing a 2-part series on the 40th anniversary of the Beirut bombing, 1983, with you and with many Marines who were there on October 16th and 23rd. Those are we're going to have a part 1 and part 2. And you've been working really hard to get major participants on the anniversary itself, which is the 23rd, to share their story. So thank you, Brad. That's a wonderful contribution. I'm going to ask Chris Perillo to unmute himself, and then Justin in Dallas. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Todd. Hi, everybody. I'm still exhausted from Saturday. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just wanted to mention my list included the Battle of Belleau Wood, because it was that battle where the Marines actually established their legend. And also the fight that they put up there pretty much elevated the American servicemen's respect in the eyes of all our allies. And that was a key battle of World War I wanted to mention. And then Quezon was a setup for Tet. It was a way to draw forces north and away from the real targets. And that was an amazing stand that we took in Vietnam. And people may not know some of the other names of the battles aside from Tet, but they will know. A lot of people will know Quezon. They'll know that battle site. And then I went back to Trenton, the Battle of Trenton. Without victory at the Battle of Trenton, Washington's army is really, really in bad shape, and we have no idea where it would have gone from there. So those were 3 that I wanted to contribute there.
Thank you, Chris. Justin, how are you in Dallas?
Oh, we're in Dallas and it's hot. I just want to say to Chris, I like the list. One, to me, in that era, Pearl Harbor was the one that united us all. It probably, for whatever reason, set us back on the path of industrialization of the war and getting things done. I go back to the Vietnam era in '69 when we had what we call Second Tet at Cu Chi Base Camp when they came up out of the tunnels and we didn't know they were there. It's just interesting as these things go. But the question I have for you, Chris, did you ever fly with a Frank Tate?
Yeah, I know Frank. Well, I knew Frank Tate.
Well, Frank, one of my best friends, I knew him as a lieutenant colonel before he deployed to 25th Division the first time. And he and 2 other officers had just returned from Iraq, and I think they set them up for good things going there. And one of the finest officers I ever knew.
He was a good man. He was a year behind me at West Point. I knew him well. It's sad to see him pass.
And if you've ever been to a funeral in Waikiki in the ocean, that's something to go to.
I bet it was. I wish I could have been there. Thanks for remembering that.
Thank you very much for your service and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, if anybody else has anything they want to add to the conversation, Glenn, did you have your own 3?
I got 2 comments I'd like to make. So I'm going to drill down on D-Day. And we were talking about this at the reenactment the other day. So yes, D-Day belongs on it, but more specifically, Omaha Beach belongs on it. Had we failed at Omaha Beach, which was possible at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning that we could have failed, had the Germans reinforced at the appropriate time or counterattacked at the appropriate time, we wouldn't have lost the Battle of Normandy or D-Day in general, but it would have significantly, I think, lengthened the war. It took 90 days to win the Battle of Normandy and get to Paris, 90 plus days, I think. And I think had we not taken Omaha Beach, it would have really prolonged that battle, right? And one of the key what ifs about World War II is, what if the European war had lasted 6 months longer and we'd have dropped the atom bombs in Europe? Because that's what they were designed for. They were designed to be dropped on Germany, not Japan. That was the original intent. So, you know, a twist here or there during the 11-month battle in the Northeast Europe could have resulted in those atom bombs being dropped. And then think about what the world would be like today had that been the case, right? The other one I'd vote to put on this list is a World War I battle, and that's the Meuse-Argonne.
Yeah.
Because, you know, one, it was a key and interesting battle, okay, but it's where the American Army came to be the modern American Army. It's where the first Army group was formed with the First and Second Army. It's where the combined arms doctrines were first developed for the military. It really looked more like, you know, World War I early on looked like the Civil War. By the Meuse-Argonne in the last campaign, it looked more like what World War II then looked like, you know, 20 years later. So those would be my two contributions.
Great points.
So, Chris, we're hoping you're taking notes here and you have all this in the next.
I am. And as I told you, Glenn, I built myself a little bit of a treadmill here. So I produce one of these every quarter. So I stay, my little gerbil runs on around that wheel pretty fast. But yes, Meuse-Argonne is definitely on the future list to do.
Yeah, but think about, again, the 12 most important battles that Americans should know. The Meuse-Argonne, for as important as it is in military history, and it really was important in America, in the development of the modern American Army, it's not a battle that kind of shaped the American identity. It's not a battle that Americans define themselves around, you know, for a generation or two or three or 10. Not like Pearl Harbor, you know, or Bunker Hill, and we might see in the future 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it, I think, with history, and Todd, you comment on this, we've talked about it a lot, becomes the sort of myth of history as much as the actual events of history.
Two different things.
Exactly. I would argue Little Bighorn is one of those that played a huge role in defining the myth of our Western history.
Yes.
And, you know, so there's a lot lately written about myth in history and how we perceive and understand our history. And unfortunately, as you and I were talking about, a lot of it gets defined by the guys who make the movies rather than.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So yes, Todd, you get it. This is very nuanced, very subjective. Nuanced. Yeah. Because it was not a battle for a war college. It wasn't a book for a war college. Right. It was a book for, you know, 10-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 25-year-olds. This is, if you're an American and you can't tell me kind of what happened at Gettysburg or why that's important in our history, get out of here. Come on. You're an American. That's what it's about. Yeah.
It's kind of like cultural literacy or American heritage literacy. Yeah. Like just some basic understandings that most Americans should have, you know, from our history.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
By the way, the reason I put Desert Storm in there is because I wanted to get as modern as I could to be relevant. And my opinion, the last war America fought and won. You can argue about that all day long, but we've degenerated into very poor war fighting lately. And Desert Storm at least provides us an anchor for when we could do it correctly.
Wow.
Yes.
Yes, Brad.
Go ahead.
The reason why I wrote about Desert Storm is what a lot of people don't realize is that over 1/4 of all our casualties are killed were due to friendly fire. And although it was a one-sided war as far as movement and firepower, I think we lost a lot in that ability not to kill our own. And it's a topic that is not easily discussed because it is a casualty and it is a tragic casualty. Now, can they be prevented in war? Never, zero. And can they be reduced? Yes, they can. And I think that's one statistic from Desert Storm that we've lost track of. And in my unit, we had a young Lance Corporal killed by friendly fire from another unit. And it really affects the morale and the outlook of that unit. So Desert Storm makes the headlines a lot for firepower and victory in short order, but it did come at a cost. And I do think there are lessons to learn from that. And that's what I put a comment in. The most important battles are the ones we learn lessons from that can be applied today. You know, so that's my view.
Yeah, good input, Brad. I understand it fully.
So someone mentioned, who was it that mentioned Vietnam and the Tet Offensive? Talk about a battle that changed American history. That is a dramatic one, right? A huge sea change in the view of the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it is what chased Lyndon Johnson out of office.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Put Richard Nixon in. So
Yeah, Tet's a good one. There's a lot to learn there. Yes. So that is a contender.
Yeah. And I would say Tet would be number 13, maybe, because it did have this impact on the nation as a whole, on the consciousness of the nation. It turned for example, I think there was a Gallup question that was asked every year from the 1930s through the 1980s. And it was something like, do you trust the federal government to do the right thing most of the time? And a majority always said yes. After Tet, I don't think there's ever been a majority since. So Tet is really a turning point that I think impacted just how Americans think of their own nation and their government. Justin, Dallas.
Well, now that you brought up Tet, my question about Tet is, was it Tet that changed, or was it the way it was reported as a perception changed? It was, my friends that were there the year before me lost nobody and maintained ground. So that's my Tet question. But for Chris, the summaries you got of the battles, where do I find those?
Oh, just go to battledigest.com.
Okay.
Just one word, battledigest.com.
I have two ladies I've met in the last 3 weeks who teach history, who say they teach it as it was. So they're going to get, I think I've got to get a set for each one of them so they can give it to their students.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's great, Justin. And I did put the link to battledigest.com here in the chat, and I will do so again.
You mean you did something right for a change?
Well, yeah, hey, blind squirrel. Yeah.
We're a breakfast club. I don't see any bacon, eggs, or anything being served tonight.
You're about the 10th person who's mentioned that to me in the past week.
Oh, I know,
what in the world are you doing a 7 p.m. event for? And you're the Veterans Breakfast Club, and you're not a club, and I'm not a veteran. So yeah.
Hey, we leave it up to you to host it so we can come up here and bullshit.
That's right.
Yeah, Justin, your point on Tet is excellent because it is the geopolitical implications of Tet, not necessarily the operational success or failure, that was critical and made Tet such a war-changing event. So yeah. Fascinating.
I've gone back and looked at lots of film that I go. Now we're doing that today to everything. Everything becomes more than it is.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem to matter what it is. If somebody throws a cigarette a butt on the ground in Utah, all of a sudden it's an incident in world history.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, Justin, and you're right. And it also, I think Tet gets into that distinction, I should say, between myth and history that Glenn and I mentioned. The history of the Tet Offensive is very different from the myth of the Tet Offensive. The history is that it was a major defeat for the Viet Cong and the NVA. But the myth that became kind of embedded in the American consciousness is that it signaled that we could never win in Vietnam, that it was a loss.
In '69, when I was with 25th Division at Cu Chi, and they're coming up out of the tunnels that we didn't even know existed, and I'm flying a UH-1H across the runway and a 51 caliber shooting at me. That was real. I mean, we did okay, but it's sort of like, okay, a lot of the nuance of battle does not get to the public. I mean, I try to tell the story as much as I can about stuff that happened to us in that 2 years I was there. I don't say very much about the time I spent flying with the VNAF Air Force, evaluating our training of Vietnamese helicopter pilots, because I was more afraid of getting killed then than I was when I was in combat.
Thank you, Justin.
Dallas, Texas is hot, so we're okay.
Chris, General Petty, might you, and Glenn, again, I don't want to step on you here, but might you kind of walk us through an explanation of one of the 12, and why you selected it and why you think it's significant? I'm sorry, Glenn, you already were going to ask that, right?
Absolutely. That was on the tip of my tongue, boss. And, that's a great thought. And we got to be careful with Chris's time. We need to finish on time for Chris.
I know, and we will.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about a battle? Just pick one?
Yeah.
Okay. I will pick Midway because everyone knows Midway. All right. So the way I try to lay it out in the book and each of these battle digests is, why do we care about it? It's the historical significance of Midway. And without getting into too much detail, most people agree this was a classic turning point battle in war, in this case, World War II in the Pacific. And it really changed America from being on the defense to the offense. And that's that turning point battle that happened in Midway. So I mean, that analysis, if you look at Battle Digest, and I do this in 3,000 words, I mean, it is a Herculean effort to take a battle like Midway and not only try to make it sequenced correctly. Imagine sequencing Midway. I just want your audience to think about it. It is confusing when this carrier is doing this and this spotter plane is doing this. Who's spotting the carriers first? Because that's everything in carrier warfare. And following that action, I gotta do that in like 3,000 words and make it concise and make it a story. So it takes a lot of effort. But the beauty of it is when it's done, you can really decipher the sequencing, the command decisions, the mistakes, and of course, the why is this important to everybody, not just military strategy and operational planners, but why is this important to our history? And so that I don't think you want me to go into the detail of Midway, but that's the obvious reason a battle like Midway is on the list. Classic turning point of American warfare, unlike Pearl Harbor, which was as one of your listeners said, rallying cry for America, and we are going to kick the Japanese's ass, and it brought America together like nothing else before. So yeah.
I would volunteer too that on Midway, what's fascinating about it is, as I'm trying to think of the general, but I'll skip that, but how close it was that it could have not been a significant victory.
Yes.
That there is a huge element of luck involved in us finding those Japanese carriers and the timing of us hitting Japanese.
I love the concept of Clausewitzian luck in warfare. It's always present and it always has some kind of impact. In Midway, it was a very large impact because, as you know, as those planes came over, the high planes, not the low planes, the torpedo bombers got their butts chewed up, but the high planes, the dive bombers, happened to emerge over those carriers at exactly their most vulnerable point when the Japanese admiral is actually in the process of trying to rearm and refuel. And it was perfect luck that tipped the outcome of that battle. Yeah.
It's always fascinating to look at these battles and in the inside of the tactics of the battle, what could have been this or that and how that would have impacted the battle. And just in every one of these significant battles, I think there's those kind of elements.
Yes. Yeah, Travis chimed in. He's got it. Yeah, from the chat.
Travis, what do you have to say?
Yeah, he put in the chat. He's got Admiral Nagumo's 2 options, and yeah, exactly. I mean, these are such great stories within the stories. Like you said, Omaha Beach, the story within the story of the battle. That's the kernel, the crux of the issue. They're fascinating. So I love doing this.
Travis said, what 2 choices did Nagumo have during the Battle of Midway? Nagumo had 2 options. One, immediately launch the 36 dive bombers spotted on Hiru and Suru to attack the enemy carrier, or wait until his Midway strike was recovered and then prepare an all-out strike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other element, last point on this is that one dive bomber group found a Japanese destroyer that had been trying to sink an American submarine, and they followed the Japanese destroyer to the main battle group because they were lost until they found that destroyer and surmised that it was proceeding at high speed to get back to the battle group. Had it not been for that, a couple of those torpedo squadrons would have never found the main battle group.
Yeah, so these are Americans. I love the contrast that I pointed out in Battle Digest on this issue, because the Japanese culture dictated this very formal, efficient chain of command, follow orders, although Nagumo did actually struggle with orders from Yamamoto, and that's part of the story. But here's the Americans. You got, I forget the names now, but you got one flight commander following his gut, another commander going with his instinct. It's like one guy's directly not following orders and he becomes the hero of the day. It's like, this is the American way of war versus the Japanese way of war. And in this case, it really paid dividends.
Yep. Sort of the Yankee ingenuity, if you will.
It was amazing at Midway. Yep.
Well, listen, I think we need to wrap this up given the time, Todd. Do you agree?
I do agree, and I'm sad that we do have to wrap it up, because I think we could go on for a long time with this conversation. I was thinking that Gettysburg, almost everybody had Gettysburg as one of the battles, and it should be, but many historians will say that the other battle that was won that day, July 3rd, 1863, was more important, the Battle of Vicksburg.
Yeah.
So that's where you get into the history versus the myth.
That's right. Yeah, and I wrestled with that, but Gettysburg just seems to be more prominent for American history.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it achieved mythic status.
Yep, exactly.
Yes. Hey, I want to encourage everybody to take the Veterans Breakfast Club survey. We do have a survey where we ask people to answer 3 questions about if they like the show, what they liked or didn't like about it, and how we could improve. You go to surveymonkey.com. I'm trying to call up the link right now just before we finish, and I will put it in the chat here. And we will see you all next week, I hope, for our open conversation. I have a feeling we're going to continue this conversation without you, General, next week on our open conversation. Thank you so much for joining us from Colorado tonight.
It was a great pleasure. I know I'm going to get some emails, and my phone number is actually on my website, so you can call me too. I mean, I'm really available. So
that's wonderful. So if people go to battledigest.com, they can get in direct contact with you.
Yeah, I'm a small shop. I'm a one-man show. So yes,
that is absolutely wonderful. Good. We will get you, and we will we'll let people know. What we'll do is actually we'll send it out also, a link to Battle Digest in our next VBC bulletin, which is an e-newsletter we send out every Monday to a few thousand people. So I think you'll get some comments. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. I
nice
appreciate
to see
it.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.